My name is Tom Corning. I live in Highland Park, and for most of my life I've been a builder. In fact, I knew I was going to be a builder when I was a child. I just wasn't exactly sure how that was going to happen from an education standpoint. But by education, I'm an architect and a structural engineer. I worked as a structural engineer for quite a few years and then decided I wanted to be a general contractor, and a nice opportunity presented itself, and I moved directly from engineering high-rises to building them, which is what I really wanted to do. In the 90s, when the markets changed, I moved from there to design build, and that enabled me to use all of the technical background in my educational background and in my work history, because then I could do architecture, engineering, and construction management all in the same project. My family and I, we've lived in the city, the north side of Chicago. We've lived in the northern suburbs. We moved to Wakanda, unincorporated. We thought it was the country. It turned out that it was exurbia, and then it became suburban. But we moved there in the 90s, where we raised our 3 children. And recently we moved back to the north suburbs after the passing of my son, Matt, 5 years ago. We decided we needed a change of scene, and we came back here to the northern suburbs, where we now live in Highland Park. And my 2 daughters are living close by, one in Wilmette and one in Rogers Park, Chicago. And one is married and one is about to be married. I have a grandson who's just passed his first birthday, and he's the light of our lives right now. His name is Charles Matthew Miller, and he's a real bright spot for us. I had a high school girlfriend that I broke up with before I went to college, and I kept going back to her for dates in between girlfriends. I just couldn't tear myself away. And one time when I was probably in grad school, she said, "You know, Tom, I'm tired of seeing your sorry face after you break up with some girl. And I think you should meet a friend of mine." So she set us up with a friend of hers that she was going to nursing school with, and that's my wife, Kim. We will have been married 40 years this October. Matt was somewhat of a surprise for us. I had 2 girls, 4 and 1. And Kim and I were trying to decide, what about the future? What about the future? Well, we talked about it. She surprised me one day and said, "Guess what? I'm pregnant again." And I said, "Really?" Because my younger daughter was 6 months old at the time. I said, "Well, that's significant. Well, I guess I could have another daughter." And she said, "Well, I don't know if the Lord is going to bring us another girl or whether this will be a son." But the challenging part about all this is that we were just in the middle of a real estate deal, moving from the north side of the city to Highland Park, and I had made a commitment to purchase a house, and part of that was predicated on her working. So Matt kind of changed all that for us. But he was a magical child from the moment that he was born. We kind of knew he was special. He very early on demonstrated that he had all the gifts. He was intellectually strong. He had athleticism from the time he could walk. And the scariest part was he was charming, and he was very, very charming with the ladies. I remember I came home from work one day, and Kim said to me, "You know, the mothers at school have routinely come up to me and said, 'We really enjoy having your son come over and play with our little girls.'" This was when he was in kindergarten and first grade. "Most of the other little boys play too rough for them to be around my daughters, but your son seems to understand that it's okay to sit down and dress a Barbie doll once in a while and to do an art project and do something more thoughtful. He can play rough, but he seems to understand when to turn it on and turn it off." And I think that it made him very popular among the ladies, even at an early age. But he definitely had all the gifts. He played all the sports. Any sport that he wanted to play, he could. And I didn't have that much skill. So I remember what it was like not to be included or to be sitting on the bench. I spent 3 years of high school basketball sitting on the bench. And I said to Matt, probably when I was coaching him in junior high, I said, "You always have to be humble about the things that you're doing on the athletic field or on the basketball court. And it's good to remember that there are others on your team or not on the team that may not have those opportunities, and that you have to look out for them. And you know, to his credit, Matt took that to heart. And I didn't realize this until after he passed, when high school friends of his came up to me in the years that followed him going to heaven and said to me, you know, the magical thing about Matt in school is that everybody knew he was the captain of whatever team he was going to be on. They all knew that. But he always made an effort when he was picking teams to pick the least liked, the least talented player in the class and pick him first. And this young person would get up and be surprised and come walk alongside of Matt. And Matt put his arm around him and say, just get ready, we're going to win some games here. And his idea was that maybe that young person didn't get a chance to play on a championship team every day, but he was going to give him a taste of what it was like to win, and he loved to win. His mother told me that when he was in grade school, he'd go over to the playground and she'd show up to do the thing where the mother helps out and watching the kids play, and they'd be playing something like Foursquare, which maybe we hadn't played at home. And Matt would be standing there on the side just watching the game, and she'd come up alongside of him, put her arm around him and say, Matt, how you doing today? Fine, Mom. What's going on? Not now, Mom. She'd say, aren't you going to get in the game? He says, oh yeah, I'm going to get in the game. She says, well, why aren't you in the game? He says, not yet. And she realized that what he was doing is he was studying the game, analyzing the strategies, and he wasn't going to get in the game until he was convinced that he had a chance to win. That's just the way he was, in a very nice way, but he was very, very competitive. He was an A student, and he didn't have to make all that much effort to do it. I wish that he had worked harder in high school. Frankly, high school was not enough of a challenge. He didn't have to do very much homework. He did A work routinely. We'd encourage him to take honors and AP courses. Sometimes he would. Sometimes he said, no, I don't want to work that hard to do this. In particular, I remember his mother was so angry with him when he was a junior in high school. She wanted him to take AP physics. And he said, no, I saw what that class is like, Mom. I don't want to do that. But it all served him well. And he got to go to a very prestigious college as a result of those grades and his ACT scores. So he had a lot of opportunity based on that.
So what college did he go to?
He went to the University of Chicago. Now, most kids who go to U of C, they're wicked smart. I mean, really smart. Now, my son had good ACT scores, and he had reasonably A work in high school. But most of the students that go to University of Chicago, they have near perfect ACT scores, and they have perfect high school grades. But the University of Chicago and some of their peers in that peer group, I would call them high academics. They're not Ivy League, but they would be regional high academics. Decided they needed to round out their student population, so they started taking student athletes who maybe were smart enough to go to their school, but would not be in their top 10. And this way they could round out the student population from a social standpoint, because the criticism of these schools is they were becoming eggheadish. So Matt got recruited by the U of C. He was also recruited by NYU and by Rochester University. These are all schools that are in that athletic conference. And we went to visit those schools, and all of them offered him academic money. They couldn't offer athletic scholarship because they were Division III. But the University of Chicago didn't offer him anything, and that's where he decided he wanted to go to school. He liked Chicago, he liked the big Chicago scene, and he liked the guys that were on the basketball team there. And so I called the university and I said, could I get some, can I get a little economic help there? And they just said, no. So only my son could find a way where most students attend that university, try and matriculate in 3 years, because they're smart enough that they've already entered with their freshman credits complete from high school. Well, my son found a way to take 5 years. Now, of course, he had a redshirt freshman year in there, which incited him to stay for an extra year and play basketball for another time. But he was there for way too long a time. And I'd love to tell you that Matt went there because of the academics, although he said that he did, and I think in his heart he did, but he really went there because he wanted to play ball and because he wanted to be in Chicago to go to school, because he loved the social environment there. And he loved it so much that his grades reflected that. The reason it took him 5 years to finish at U of C was he really wasn't doing that stellar a job. I was not astute enough to see this, but my wife would complain often that his sleep habits were erratic, that his social behavior was not consistent, that he was sometimes erratic, that he would have manic days. And I just attributed this to him, growing into his adult skin. I was naive about it. So in retrospect, we clearly see that he was beginning to depend on the oral opiates for part of his regime. And unfortunately, the orthopedic surgeon who was handling him was not well informed about the addictive properties of these oxy products, which now I understand are nothing more than synthetic heroin, and continued to write the script for several months. The SMART studies today tell us that if you take those pills for any more than 4 or 5 days and you're susceptible to addiction, that you will become addicted. So he developed a serious pill habit, and his mother and I were really unconscious of the problem that this was causing. And apparently he was having troubles with his work. He was a paralegal at the time, and his office manager was beginning to bring him up on these issues and say that he was not consistent, they couldn't count on him to be where he was supposed to be, he wasn't meeting deadlines. And so finally one day he decided to be honest about it, and he came home and he sat his mother and I down and explained to us that he'd had a pill problem, that his girlfriend had put her foot down on it and said, "Either you fix this or I'm gone." She was a very serious woman. They were both UFC graduates. They both had big plans for their careers. He intended law school. She was intending to go to medical school. And she said, "Either fix the pill problem, Matt, or I have to leave."
What year was this when she told her that?
This occurred in 11. He had had the surgery in 9, so he'd been horsing around with the pills. I say horsing around, taking them on and off again, but it had gotten pretty consistent by the time they got into 11. And so in 11, this is when he exposed this to us. And he said, "I've gotten myself off the pills. I'm done with it now. I've gotten cleaned up. I'm not going back to them." He applied to law school that summer. It was accepted. He went off and he started law at University of Dayton, and he was doing very well. In the days when Matt was taking pills, or when he was doing worse, when he started injecting heroin, I couldn't believe all the things that came out of his mouth. I couldn't trust what he was telling me. And I wasn't aware how much deceit there was going on, but he was very clever at masking the truth and explaining things the way he wanted the listening audience to hear them. So he would conceal this. But when he came out of rehab in 13, there was a great deal of honesty, and he shared with his mother all these things. So we now understand all the things that happened. But when he went off to law school, he was clean, and he stayed that way all through the fall term. The problem, Cliff, is that he came home in Thanksgiving, I think it was, and said, "I've been very successful here at school. Things are going very well. I feel like I deserve a little break." And he decided to take a pill. Who knows what makes the human mind do this, but he decided that he would do that. And then one pill led to another, led to a couple. Next thing you know, he's back into it. Somehow, he found a way to do this and still continue to function and go to law school successfully. The scariest part was that when a friend of his at law school saw he was having trouble staying alert in class, this is because he was taking opiates to go to sleep at night. He said, "Well, here, I take Adderall, and that keeps you alert." And he gave him Adderall, and Matt took the Adderall to stay awake. And he said, "Wow, this is great." So he went home to his internist, who was now managing his opiate intake. Said, "We'll write you small scripts, Matt, so that you can have a small amount of this. It'll take care of your restless leg that you have as a result of the opiate addiction you had." And the doctor thought he was managing Matt in kind of an outplacement from opiate addiction, when really all he was doing was just fueling the addiction. And then by writing the script for Adderall, which he never should have done, he basically put Matt on an opiate Adderall roller coaster. Opiates to go to sleep, Adderall to stay up and go to class. None of this was done for what I would call recreational needs. This was now just the addiction driving the bus. And when all the doctors finally realized that they shouldn't be doing this, and they were shutting him off one at a time, and this is in the days before all the larger drugstores were communicating with each other. They now communicate freely. HIPAA was throwing a roadblock down and preventing these guys from sharing information back and forth freely with each other. Now they've networked all this information so that guys that are pill shopping, doctor shopping, or looking for other things, there's more preventatives in place that didn't exist then. So, but Matt did run through all the opportunities he had for doctor shopping and for getting pills legally and through insurance program. This is when the real trouble started because he had to go and buy these on the street. This had two sides. Now he's associating himself with, I would call it the underbelly of our society, and he's having to pay double, triple, quadruple what the pills ordinarily would cost. They're expensive anyway. Now he's paying premium price for them. So things started to disappear out of his apartment. He's selling his golf clubs, his television, his PlayStation, the few things that he had of value. And then he's hitting his mother and I for money that I didn't think he needed. He had a student loan. He had residual funds from the student loan that were to pay his living and his apartment expense. And he's out of them, months into the semester. I knew that there was a problem, but I just thought that he was being reckless. I did not associate it with an addictive issue. So once the money ran out for the pills that he was buying illegally, the guy who was selling him the pills said, well, here, try this, it's a lot cheaper. And that's when he started heroin. A bag of heroin is $5. It's nothing compared to what the pills cost.
What year was that?
I would say that the heroin started in the fall of 12. And that's when his behavior really got to be erratic, and his mom and I then started hounding him. We knew that he'd had a pill problem that he'd gotten past. We knew that he was now taking pills on a prescriptive basis, we thought. In truth, the prescription was just the beginning. We knew that he was theoretically being managed under care of a doctor. The truth was the doctor here in Chicago at Northwestern was being manipulated by Matt, so he wasn't really being handled by anybody. He was self-medicating. And when he started doing the heroin, that's when his classwork started to fail. So he called me in February of 13 and said, I need to come home, I need some help, I need to get permanent, long-term fix for this. I said, I didn't realize the pills had gotten to be that big a problem. He says, well, Dad, it's gotten more advanced than just the pills, and I need to talk to you about that when I get home. So he came home. We had a very, very difficult weekend because he was all hepped up, ready to go. His mind was clear, he was going to go get help. And as the weekend wore on, the days ticked on, his resolve to get better disappeared because the heroin was pulling at him. And so finally, at the end of that weekend home, we had to arrange for an intervention. And the intervention resulted in him going up to Michigan to a professional facility where he was there for 2 months. They cleaned him out, got him dried up, taught him a lot about what his addiction had been caused by, a lot of self-introspection, a lot of study about what had happened, about how his childhood, the craving for the endorphins that he got from athletic competition, led him to want to experience life in other quote-unquote higher planes. In Matt's words, outside of the normal range of experience that my brain could give me, which meant he loved to dabble in alcohol and recreational drugs, none of these to a serious extent, and all of it pretty much under control. He would get into mischief with these issues. He'd come askance of the law. He had trouble with a DUI in college. But I wouldn't characterize any of this as alcoholism or drug addiction. It was just crazy, wild behavior. So when he got hooked to the pills, I know, because he told me that he felt that he'd managed the rigors of athletic competition, he'd managed drinking, he'd managed the occasional recreational pills and other things he'd tried, he'd managed occasional marijuana smoking. He thought, I can do all these things and I can function at a high level. And he thought he could do that with the opiates. And he really couldn't. And when it came to injecting heroin, he absolutely could not. And he recognized this. This is what being in recovery and going to a facility taught him. And when he came home all cleaned up, dry-eyed and crystal clear, his mother said to me, I see a joy in his face that I haven't seen in a long, long time. He said, What I learned in rehab was that the heroin was simply masking all of my brain sensors that bring about pleasure. All of those sensory parts of your brain that tell you it's exciting to compete in athletics, it's exciting to have a girlfriend, it's exciting to play a game and win, it's exciting to learn something new in school. All that dissipates because the only craving that you have is for the heroin. So he said, I will have to work on this the whole rest of my life. And if I ever take heroin again, it will likely kill me, because I will have weaned myself onto the heroin through months and months of opiate abuse. And if I slip back quickly and take heroin now, it will probably put me to sleep and I just simply won't wake up. I've learned this through the study that we did at rehab. Actually, I have been doing some speaking, but I would like to be doing a lot more. I would say that my speaking opportunities have been limited, and a lot of that has to do with finding a willing audience. A lot of where I'd like to be talking primarily is at junior high and high school level. And in fact, 8th or 9th grade would be, I would say, the sweet spot. And the opportunities to do that are somewhat limited because a lot of school districts think that this problem of opiate abuse and heroin use is not our problem. It's not our issue, it's somebody else's issue. And I know that back in the day when I was a youngster, we used to talk about what's a bridge drug, and it was a big terminology. What's a bridge drug? And I don't see it that way. I see this as an issue about creating a mindset that it's important to be in control of your brain all the time, that you're the master of your body, and when you drink or smoke or take drugs, you are not in control of your body, and other things can happen. And particularly, you can start to feel the need or the urge to do that again and again, which is the early stages of addiction. So I want to warn young people before they ever get susceptible to repeating the use of these things that take you out of your normal experiences, that this is something that's very dangerous. So what I do is I just simply tell them Matt's story. I tell them chronologically how he started as an athlete, how he started to experience things at a different level through the endorphins that come from athletic competition, and I move that into here's how he wanted to experiment with drink, and then to smoking marijuana, and then with pills. None of these things to a particularly destructive level, just foolish because it gave him the impression that he could do these things and control it and be in a management position, and it wouldn't have any detrimental effect. So I share that with him and then tell them the very sad story of how his addiction led to his demise directly, but that he might have been able to avoid this demise if he had just been more aware of the dangers of using these things recreationally that take him out of his normal experience. And I'm trying to encourage them that there are so many exciting things that you can experience in life having to do with life, love, athletics, the pursuit of the arts, that these things all bring joy, and that they get the same kind of rush in your brain that you can get from these other things that are unnatural, and it would be better to stay on this side of that fence than the other side. I would say that there were probably 2 events that I remember as being very compelling. One was I was on a speaking panel over in Buffalo Grove that a friend of mine had arranged to raise awareness in the community of the dangers of opiate use. And some of the members on the panel were very, very expert. In particular, I don't remember his name, but there was a physician who is an addictionologist, and he had studied this. And he started talking about how the brain reacts to these things. And this is where I guess I would say that I picked up most of the things that I say about how the brain reacts to drug and to alcohol. And it was from listening to this man talk. And in particular, he talked about the challenge that genetic predisposition can put on a person, because you or I might do things that wouldn't be a problem at all. We might try an opiate and might try it for an extended period and say, okay, well, we're done with this, and go on and nothing happens. But if you have an addictive personality because of your genetic background, this is a very dangerous place to be. But really, that message, if I really was going to have an impact on this and have any meaning of the loss of my son to this problem, I needed to get in front of young people and tell them, please don't be this person. And please understand that drug addiction is not necessarily what we thought. Arrogantly, we thought in the 60s and 70s that drug addiction was for the down and out. Those people who had failed in their lives turned to drugs. The truth is that most heroin deaths in young people today occur in males between the ages of 20 and 27 years old because they got addicted in the ages between 18 and 25, and they are passing because they're high-performing people. These are typically, I can't tell you how many I've sat and listened to parents rub their hands and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Another star student, another academic excellent athlete has now passed. The captain of the football team, the champion of their team, whatever sport they were in. Because what happens is two things. One is they get convinced that they can handle all these things. They have this joy, this excitement from the endorphins that come from athletic competition and play. They've been injured, so they've had pills of all sorts, and they think, oh, I can handle this. And they're cocky enough to think they can conceal it because they're smart enough to deceive their family members. All these things conspire to create the perfect storm. So that the student athlete, the excellent student who also performs at a high level in athletic competition, they are at most risk. And if they have this in their family genetic background, it puts them doubly at risk. It's very hard for me to break through and have an impact. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm in my mid-60s. These kids are 15. They generally, especially if I start preaching, the door shuts and they're going to tune me out. So I try in my discussion to be a storyteller, to talk about my son Matt and make this his story, as opposed to saying anything about what I think or I feel or what I think they should do. Because this is the danger when you're talking to young people, is that they've heard lectures from my peer group too many times. So I try and make this compelling. But I will tell you, the very, very best, most compelling presentations that I've given have been when I'm partnered with a young man who's my son's age, who would be my son's age if he were still alive. He's in his early 30s. He's now a minister, and he's a recovering heroin addict. And he's one of those very, very small segment of people that was able to figure out a way to get better and to stay straight. And he tells them the story in what I would say a parlance that younger people can understand, because he's not so far generationally from them. The anecdotes that he tells are both relevant because he still talks like a young person, but it's also personal. He's telling them, this is what happened to me, and this is what's happening to me today, and here's how I'm doing it. So it's very personal. This gets them riveted. So you're right, when it comes time for Q&A, the questions start slowly because everybody's shy about raising their hand and being the first one. But once one or two young people have asked a question, then the floodgates open. So typically we're doing this in a health class. We usually have about 45 or 50 minutes, that's it. So we've got to move quickly. I give my story, he tells his story. We sometimes race through the slides that we have because we're trying to maximize the Q&A opportunity. Because when we start interacting with them and they start asking questions that comes up in their mind, that's when it gets compelling. That's when we have their attention, especially when Johnny asks something that his peer group thinks about and Susie hears that and it rings a bell for them. The most compelling thing is you ask them if they will raise their hand if they have a family member who's suffering with alcohol or addiction of some kind. Excuse me, it's very much more prevalent than one would think. I want them to find a way to identify with my son. For someone in the audience or some couple of someones to see themselves or a friend of theirs in my son's story and to get scared. You've heard remember that old movie when we were young called Scared Straight? And maybe I'm being naive about this, and maybe scared's the wrong word, but I want them to feel some fear in the pit of their stomach that their brother, their sister, their cousin who they've seen struggle with this is really genuinely at risk, and that they'll go home and talk about this. How much danger this is, and how easily this can become a fatal issue. It will be life-wrecking for sure, but it could also turn fatal. It will ruin their careers, their family life, their love life. It will destroy all those things. but it may cost them ultimately their life much earlier than the Lord planned on them going back home.
I know some contestants are going to do a parent speech or maybe a parent riddle. I thought I would try something new. This is a parent rap, so enjoy it. On a December night in 1985, my P's, Tom and Kim, were blessed with a surprise in the form of a giggling and dribbling little baby. And let me tell you now that this boy was crazy. Always climbing trees and chasing the girls. But to mom and dad, this kid meant the world. 18 years later and I'm all grown up, I gotta show you some love cause I don't show it enough. I'ma start with my mother, I place no one above her. Without her motivation I'd be stuck in a gutter. She's short but let me tell you my mom packs the punch. She's even energetic when she's packing my lunch. Dedication to her faith, her family, and others is what makes Kim Corning the #1 mother. Without you, Mom, I'm lost. You're the cane for my limp. I've been content my whole life, cause loving you's been a cinch. This next guy we call Tom, or even Big TC, but he's just regular old dad to me. He stands pretty tall. I think he's 7'3", but his height ain't the only thing I look up to, you see. You're intelligent and wise, Dad. You've been through a lot. You taught me all about math and how to shoot a jump shot. When I grow up and have a family of my own, I pray I do as well as you've done with our home. You're the ever-patient source of guidance and life lessons, even when your offbeat humor leaves me in question. I love you, Dad, and I love you, Mom, too. When I feel overwhelmed, you're the ones I run to. In closing, I hope my speech didn't sound whack. I just love my parents, and yo, that's a wrap. Peace.
Between what is said and what's unsaid.